Okay, so just to continue our discussion, we were briefly talking about how traditionally war literature has been used as a sort of almost like a propaganda used by a nation to promote its interests and its war efforts. So literature was almost used as a way to spread this kind of enthusiasm or patriotism and really get people, you know, on the same board or on the same wavelength in regards to how their country is conducting itself around the world in terms of its military expansion. So the depiction of, war heroes, men who served their country with honor or died for their country in a really sort of courageous act. These were all sort of the tropes or the archetypal characters that you would find in kind of war literature, where you could say it was very sort of a glorified vision of war. It was meant to sort of inspire people to be more patriotic, to enlist even, to want to serve their country and to prove themselves as heroes by becoming soldiers. So this is one set of functions for war literature. We're going to look at the more sort of modern war literature that is going to be sort of our focus for this term. So we're not going to read any war literature that is very pro-war. We're actually going to take a look at war literature that is more critical of the military sort of efforts. But first, let's take a little closer look at this piece of this quotation. So, Dulce Decorum est pro patria mori. It is sweet and honor to die for one's fatherland. So this sentiment would have been, very common, kind of a truth or a piece of mythic wisdom that would have been part of war literature, especially the sort of traditional stuff where, military heroism was a big part of that. So there was this idea that if you were a soldier, you were doing something very honorable, very noble, and in death, you would be, you would achieve some sort of heroic glory. So even if you died, you didn't survive, you were doing something very noble, very honorable, and it would be this moment of sweetness, right? A joyful moment to die serving. So this was kind of the myth around the soldier that was very sort of prominent and used to bolster a country's war efforts and again inspire kind of patriotism in the reader. So in the original ode by Horace, we get a sense of this patriotism, right? This sense of courage and what it meant to be a soldier and how glorifying a death would be, how joyful even it would be to die for one's country. So let's read this excerpt from the ode. To suffer hardness with good cheer and sternness school of Wilfred bred, our youth should learn, let steed and spear make him one day the Parthian's dread. Cold skies, keen perils brace his life, methinks I see from rampart town some battling tyrant's matron wife, some maiden look in terror down. Ah, my dear lord, untrained in war, O tempt not the infuriate mood of that fell lion I see from far, he plunges through a tide of blood. What joy for fatherland to die! Death's darts in flying feet overtake, nor spare of recreant chivalry a back that cowers or loins that quake. So in this excerpt, we see that line that's highlighted, what joy for fatherland to die. This is sort of the sentiment that, traditional war literature would be promoting, right? So this idea that being a soldier is, all about courage, duty, honor, and even in death, you achieve sort of a measure of greatness, and joy, a sense of joy, to die such a noble way. So this is kind of the myth of the soldier, or the illusion of what war would be for many young men reading stories and poetry. They would sort of see this soldier as a hero figure who, even in death, achieves greatness. So that's the sort of background for war literature that we want to sort of compare some of the texts that we're studying to. And I want us to look at some of the more anti-war narratives that are also written against this kind of glorifying image of death on the battlefield. So the texts that I selected for our course fall into a sort of different category, and they function differently from that traditional sort of glamorized version of war that almost like turns into a sort of a mythic figure, the soldier who dies courageously in the battlefield. So the literature that we're going to look at functions differently. So they do two central functions, I think, well, there's probably more than that too, but for our case, we can look at functions of literature that de-glamorizes the war and really tells it like it is. So these are going to be texts, stories that don't sort of glamorize or glorify the war experience. They're more gritty. They don't shy away from showing you the sort of violence, the immorality, the corruption, the ugly truths of warfare, and really sort of confront the reader with some of the sort of graphic and gruesome details. So the texts that I've picked or selected fall into this category, right? So it's really about trying to represent what war is really like. So these authors are sort of attempting to not present war in a sort of glorified or glamorized way. And another function of the war literature that we're going to be reading is, a lot of them anyway, have to deal with this, either the writer or the protagonist's attempt to resolve traumatic events in their past. So the protagonist will be suffering, or there'll be a character or characters trying to sort of resolve traumatic events that happened on the battlefield or during wartime. And the function of writing about or talking about their past traumatic events will be their attempts to sort of resolve or heal from these traumas. So the war literature that we're going to study is going to be different from the traditional sort of glorified vision of a soldier. It's going to be a lot more gritty and sort of dealing with some of the complexities of being a soldier, some of the conflicts involved, and deal with some of the sort of realities of being a soldier. And I thought we would, just to situate our discussion of war literature, look more closely at Wilfred Owen's poem Dulce, Decorum Est. So he's doing something specific. You might be familiar with this poem if you took it in high school, possibly. But he is writing he was a soldier himself, and he wrote this poem, and it became a kind of anti-war sentiment, or he was declamorizing the war and telling it like it is, as he experienced it. And he uses that line, Dulce decorum est, but he exposes it as a lie. So he's saying that it is not sweet or joyful or honorable. There is no honor or sweetness in dying. It is just death, right? It's not something that should be glamorized or glorified. It is an awful, horrifying thing. So let's take a look at Wilfred Owen's poem, Dulce Decorum Est.
This poem is called Dulce et Decorum Est. It was written by Wilfred Owen in 1918 in the fields of France during the First World War. Dulce et Decorum Est means it is sweet and right. It's the first few words of a Latin saying. Actually, the full saying's at the end of the poem. It means it is sweet and right to die for your country. Anyway, Dulce et Decorum Est. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear, at every jolt, the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria more.
So poets like Wilfred Owen or his sort of mentor and friend Siegfried Sassoon, they wrote poems. They were serving as soldiers, but then they wrote poems that really countered the sort of popular representation of war that would be, all over, that would have been popular, right? So that image of the noble, heroic, military soldier who, even in death, achieves this great, glamorized, courageous death. Here we have Wilfred Owen sort of countering that, saying there's nothing sweet or right about a young man dying on the battlefield, right? It is horrifying and traumatic and, a travesty that, all these young, innocent lives have been taken based on just sort of these patriotic lies or these sort of politicians who have, interests in expanding or conquest. It's the innocent lives of the soldiers, his friends, his fellow soldiers, and all of the sort of people he has befriended who are losing their lives while, it's the military leaders, it's the politicians who are sort of spreading these lies and spreading the propaganda. So he is really sort of countering the popular sentiment that glorified war and showing, de-glamorizing it, telling the audience what it's really like to be a soldier on the front lines, to lose one's friends and fellow soldiers, and the horrifying, gritty realities of death on the battlefield. So that's more of what we'll be looking at over the course of this term, is literature that counters or de-glamorizes the war experience and really shows the conflicts involved in